Controversial missions of the Second World War. The Duke, representing the Queen, laid a wreath for the victims. Also there, people from Coventry, which, like Dresden, suffered terrible bombing.
From Germany and from Britain, former enemies came together this morning to remember the dead of Dresden. Some were recalling friends and loved ones, others merely the sheer scale of the destruction. This woman had left her parents, husband and 3 young children sheltering in a cellar. When she returned, they were still sitting there, but they were all dead. This couple took to the street 10 seconds before a bomb fell on their house. It was senseless destruction, he said, but it was to be expected. Germany had started it all. It was known as Operation Thunderclap. The first wave of 243 Lancasters dropped nearly 1,500 tons of explosives. A second wave followed 3 hours later. Then the Americans bombed for a further 48 hours. Dresden, one of Europe's most beautiful cities, burned. The chaos of the end of the war and the arrival of the Russians here meant that no definitive statistics were ever compiled. So we shall never know exactly how many people died at Dresden. But most agree that 25,000 is a conservative estimate. The Duke of Kent came today to represent the Queen. She was pelted with egg when she visited Dresden 3 years ago. But wounds are healing. The Queen has personally donated money to the city's rebuilding funds. Dresden has prided itself in sharing the grief of all victims of war, including its twin city, Coventry.
So I think there's a determination that we should be jointly committed in Europe to new efforts to make peace and to disarm and to reduce the number of arms in the world as well. There are a lot of people in Dresden who share these aims with us. I hope we can work together for that.
The bombing of Dresden will forever be controversial. There is still no consensus on whether its destruction was criminal or an inevitable and justified act of war. Jonathan Munro, ITN, Dresden.
Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Jonathan Munro and asked him if the people of Dresden still felt bitter about what had happened to their city 50 years ago.
I think only a small minority feel that bitterness still. There have been applications for some demonstrations here, but they've been banned by the local authorities. But every veteran that I've spoken to, everybody who was in this city on that night 50 years ago who survived, has said to me that there is no bitterness. Of course there's regret and there's still deep grief. The people we were speaking to this morning who lost all their families will never get over that grief. But there's a realization too that it was wartime and that the whole tactic of aerial bombing was actually started by the Germans.
Well, half a century has now passed. Do you think that today's commemoration will be the last?
There are no official plans at this stage for another commemoration on this scale in, for example, 10 years from now. This is, in a sense, the most important commemoration there's been, not just because it's half a century, but also because it's the first time Dresden has been able to commemorate a major anniversary like this since liberation from communism. And as one of the veterans put it to me this morning, we're commemorating the years since the war today, as well as the events of that night 50 years ago.
And the ceremonies are due to continue later today, I gather?
Yes, into this evening. There'll be an ecumenical mass and a special service this evening. And then behind me at the Church of Our Lady, there'll be a candlelit vigil. This is the famous church, which is still in the same state of destruction as it was after the bombing.
Sorry about that. Here, 3 boys aged between 12 and 16 are being questioned by police in Sheffield after a car accident which left a woman impaled on a fence. Colette Mara, who's 27, needed emergency surgery for a neck wound after she was thrown onto spiked railings when she was hit by a stolen car. Her condition was today said to be stable.